Hey guys, in this video, we are going to learn how to fetch data from an API using React and some of React hooks such as use state and use effects. And this project is just basically you getting advice from an API. Well, click on this dice button right here. So if I hover over on dice button, you can see a glow around it. And if I click on it, I see that this advice and this ID right here is changing. So if I do that one more time, you can see. So there's a little bit of delay, and that's coming from the API directly, but it's still working as we want. As you can see, don't take life too seriously. And this project is from Frontend Mentor. So you can go to frontendmentor.io slash challenges slash this name of this project, and you can download and follow along if you wish to, and you can as well get the complete code in the description below, and timestamp will also be in the description as well. So let's dive right into the video. Alright guys, so I have VS Code open and I have some codes in it which I'm going to run through. I essentially have, first of all, I have um a Vite application up and running. So if this is your first time using React, you just have to um create a Vite application, and there's another one called create React app, but it's deprecated and it's not really advisable to use it. So just run npm create Vite at latest and type today, and make sure you have Node.js installed for you to be able to use npm. So when you run npm create Vite at latest, you can specify the path name you want, and if I specify period, it means I will be creating the Vite application in the default path. So I won't be doing this because I already have it created already. So once you've done that, it should give you a list of language frameworks rather to use. Then you can select, and basically the rest process is quite straightforward. So and after doing that, you should be or you should have some codes right here, but I've gotten rid of some. So you see app.css. I think that is the only one that is excluded from here. Yeah. And I also brought in the images we'll be using, which you can get from the description below. So I've gotten rid of the app.css file, and I also gotten rid of the default CSS, and I added some default stylings to it, so like the font family and the colors. And I also removed the default margin and padding, and also brought the default right here. So for the app itself, I've got rid of the boilerplate code, and I quickly wrote one. As you can see, it said hello world, and this is the endpoint we'll be hitting. So this is the endpoint. So you can just type it out, or you can still get it from the code in the description. And lastly, in the vite config, I changed the port to 3000. So I think the default port is 4173. So I change it to 3000. You can leave it as it is, or you can as well change it if you want to. So let me quickly run the development server. Let's see what we have. So I'm open as a localhost. Bring this right here. Close this out. Alright, so this is what we need. Alright, now since we'll be talking about how to get data from an API, we won't be stressing too much on styling. So unlike my other videos, I'll focus more on logic in this video rather than styling. We'll still do the styling later on, but that will be in the end of the video. But my main focus in this video is to focus more on the logic, because styling can come later on. So for the logic, what we basically need to do is to just structure the HTML page first, then we add the logic and then we style it. So the structure is we need to create a container. So let's just get rid of this one. Give it a class called container to hold, so this entire stuff right here, to hold it. And inside that container, create another um, class, another divider with a class of advice container. And inside that, we'll create a p tag with a class of advice title. And inside that p tag, we'll have advice and put in this pound sign. Should be advice. Put in this pound sign and add a span tag. And inside that span tag, we should give it a class of advice ID, and let's put a demo ID right here. So this advice 10 is basically this, but it will change dynamically later on. So under this, we'll create the content. So we'll say advice content, and inside that we'll create the text. So history, and give this a class of advice text. You don't necessarily need to give everything a class, but I just felt like doing it. So let's just put in a demo text for now. We just say things. This is one I wrote out. Things are just things. But don't get too attached to them. Type today for some reason. Okay, cool. Next, we need to add a pattern. So this pattern right here, pattern divider. So let's just quickly add that in. Say pattern divider, and it's actually two images, one for the mobile and one for desktop. But we'll be changing it from our CSS later on. We'll just leave it here right now. So what we need to do now is to create the button. So it should be a button with a class of btn. Inside that button, we need to bring in this dies image, because this is actually an image. So we can just do that by saying import dies from, let me look for the path. So the path is assets, and the name of the image is icon dies. So it says Fiji. Then we just need to bring it right here. So say image, and the source should be this dies right here. All right, cool. So what we need to do right now is basically we need to get this ID and this advice. I also need them to change or click on this button. So we need to keep track of this advice and monitor it if there is a change to it, and update that changes. And for us to be able to do that, we need a state called, or we need a React rather called use state. So I can do that by putting use state from React. And what use state does essentially, I have an article on use state and use effects. I will link that in the description below as well. But use state essentially is a React hook that essentially allows you to store and update your data whenever the React components change. So whenever this app component change, your data might be might change as well dynamically depending on what you're doing. So we want to store this advice in a state. So we can just call this advice and set advice. So we'll say use state and we'll set this to an empty string. So this is advice itself, and this is the function to update this advice. All right, cool. So if we even come right here now, and let's just do that right now. So if we come here and just put in the advice, it's going to be empty. But if I write something here, that should be appeared here. So you see how the use state works now. And if this function changes, it's going to update and affect this variable right here. All right, cool. So what we need to do right now is that we need to um, like I said, we need to fetch the data using the fetch API that is inbuilt in React. So we'll grab this for now. Or should we grab it now? Okay, let's just grab it and let's just create a function here. So we say call this fetch advice to be an arrow function. And since we are getting this from somewhere, we need to add async function to this, because this is an asynchronous function, which means it takes some time to do. So inside this fetch advice, what we need to do is to first of all add a try and catch block to handle the errors and success messages. So for the error, let's just quickly console log the error. But in a real life scenario, we actually put create a state to handle the error. But just for this tutorial, I'll leave it at this. And inside this try block right here, we'll first of all create a constant and we'll call this res, which for the response, let's just say response. So we'll say await. So anytime you have an async function, remember to put await as well. If not, you won't get a response and your function won't work as expected. So await, then add fetch. Like I said, fetch is a built-in API. Then what do we want to fetch? We want to fetch the advice from this endpoint. So copy this, or just cut it out and paste it right here. Okay, cool. So what we need to do right now is to check if that response is okay. So if it's not okay, so if the response does okay, this exclamation mark negates it. So if it's not okay, I just throw in a new error. So throw new error and say could not fetch data. But if the response is okay, what we need to do now is to say const, they'll store that response in the data and say await response dot json. Right now, let's just console to log out the data. So if we save this, nothing is going to happen because we've not called this function. And we won't be calling this function directly here. So if it's a typical JavaScript, we can do that here. But in React, anytime a component we refresh, that component mount. So if you call it right here, essentially this fetch advice will keep on um calling itself, which will lead to an endless loop. So we won't even bother trying it at all. So we need something that can help us to um, perform like a side effect. So when this fetch advice loads, we need to get this. We need this to. Oh, sorry. Let me retrace my statement. When these components, this app components loads, we need this fetch advice to run once or run as many times when we click on something or we do something. So for us to be able to achieve that, we need to use another hook called use effect. And use effect is essentially a React hook that enables you to perform side effects in your functional components. And side effects are essentially operations that affect the external operations in your outside your browser. So, like for instance, we're trying to fetch data for some from an API, and that API is not directly on our browser, so we're getting it from somewhere. So that's the best, one of the best scenario to use effects. You can also use it for getting subscriptions, and if you want to manually change your manipulate the DOM as well. So that being said, to use effect, you essentially need to just bring it right here and say use effect. And what you need to do is that inside this, so like I said, we'll be doing this in two ways, or you can choose which one works, and you can let me know which one is bad or which one is good. So like I said, we've brought it in, and now we need to bring it right inside our app component. So I do that by saying use effect, and it takes in a function. The function, we need to write our side effect, and after that we need also a dependency array. So this dependency array essentially runs anytime our use effect changes. So for now, we're going to set it to an empty array, which means it's going to run once. But if we have something here and that changes, this use effect is going to rerun again. So that's just basically how the dependency array works. So inside this, we've gotten this now. So we need to copy this right here, or instead we can do this two ways, like I said. So let's just call this fetch advice now. So once we save this, it's going to run only once. So if we open our inspect tools, we should see the object. So this is our data is coming in. So this is a sleep object, and inside that sleep object we have this advice and the ID. So we need to store this now in this set advice so that we can access it in our DOM with this advice right here. So what we need to do right now is to come here and say the set advice should be the data, or instead before we do that, let's just say, let's create a variable called advice data just to make this easier, and say data.sleep, because like we saw earlier, this is an object and the other data are inside the sleep object. So we'll now set this advice to this advice data. So now we now have access to the advice itself, and to the ID. So what we have to do right now is to say advice So you can see that if I refresh now, this is actually erroring out because this advice is supposed to have another um property code advice to it, which is considered as coming right in. And anytime we refresh now, this will change. So we have to do the same to the ID too. So we say advice dot ID. So this ID will change anytime we save the page. Okay, cool. So another thing we need to do right now is, okay, so we need to click on this anytime we want to change. And one way to do that is to just come right here and just say on click and passing that fetch advice. So you can see that when we click on this right now, it works. But for some reason, I'm not really a fan of this process, this method. It works fine, but I don't really like it. So if you choose to use this, that's cool by you. But I want to quickly add two more states. So the first state now is to essentially a loading state. So that when we click on this, we'll let the user know if that's the process that is going on before getting data instead of randomly waiting. So we just say loading and set loading. So this will be use state and let's say it to be true by default here. Or let's say it to be false. But if you say it to be true, it's going to cause an error. So it should be false by default. And also going to add another state called show advice. Show advice. I said show advice. So this one will be true. We'll make it true later, but let's just set it to false. So this show advice will be, like it says, and is a boolean that we're able to help us to check if the advice is being clicked rather than just rather than us calling the advice directly from this function right here, which again I said is not bad, but I just tried to make it much different. So what we need to do right now is we'll copy this one here and we'll paste it inside this use effect function. So now we no longer have access to this, so we'll get rid of it for now. And what we need to do right now is that we'll set this loading to true. Why after if we finally get a response or not, that is this finally catch block right here. So we set loading so false. So this one works if we get the data or not. So if we get the data, we don't get it, to set it to false. So if I save it, that is coming. We've not called it right now. And next thing we're going to do, we need to check if it's the actual data we want. So we'll come here and say, instead of calling it under this right here, we'll just say if it's to show advice. This can be a better name. I think this is not a better name for this. You can rename this to something better. So we just paste this right here. Then we'll pass this show advice into this dependency array. So this dependency array now, this show advice now is this boolean right here. So try to anytime we try to click on this button, it's going to check if it's true or not. And if it's false, we can't be able to click it, but if it's true, we'll be able to fetch the data. Like I said, it's still the same thing with the previous one we did. So right now, we'll come in and create another variable. I say undo show advice, and inside this arrow function, we just say set show advice to be whatever the show advice is. And right now, we'll pass in on click and passing the handle show advice. So before we click on this, we still need to bring in this loading state right here. So we can just check, say if we just use conditional rendering and say loading and check. If it's loading, you can just say loading, or you say generating advice. We'll change this later on, or you can just pass in this right here. Better state, this can just be in a p tag. Alright, cool. So hopefully this should be true. Okay, let me just show you the difference. So once we refresh now, we won't see anything right here, but we want to see something anytime we refresh the page. So we need to set here to true by default. So when we refresh now, we get the latest advice. Then when we click on this is okay, it's generating advice now. So you can see that it's generating advice. I also need to disable the button anytime it's loading. So anytime we are generating the advice, we shouldn't be able to click on the button. Alright, cool. That's all for the logic. So let's just style this whole thing right here. Okay guys, so like I have mentioned, I have some styles already set up. So what we need to do right now is to just, since we're having an image, so we can just quickly um set this to a max width of 100%. Display should be block. Then for the body, you just need to set the font family. So it's primary font. The line height should be 1.3. Then background should be is neutral 300. Okay, cool. You can just overset. I think there's a white color here. Let's just leave it as it is. So we'll say the container right now should be display flex. Justify content should be center. Align item center. The height should be 100 VH, which will take the entire height of the screen. And this justify and align item simply just center it on the screen. So we need to also center everything in the middle. So say text align center, and also add a padding inline of 1 rem. Okay, cool. So for the advice container now, advice container, you just need to set the background color to this 350. The width should be 450 pixels. The border radius should be 0.4 rem. Okay, then the padding block, which is for top and bottom. Padding block, let's just give it 2.5 will work. What's on the previous value I used? 2.5. Okay, for the advice container right now, which is this whole thing, so we say advice title rather, not advice container. So which is this right here. We set the color to asset 400. Then the text transform should be uppercase, and letter spacing should be 2 pixels. We also need to make it bold, so let's add 40 of 600. Okay, let's also reduce the font size, and let's give it a margin bottom of 1 rem. Okay, it's working fine. So for the text itself, say advice text, we'll give it a color of 350, I guess, and font size should be quite big, so let's say 1.5 rem. Okay, then the padding in line, which is left and right, should be 1 rem. So it's going to work later on smaller screens. That's why I'm adding this right now. So the pattern divider, which is this right here, say we're going to bring it from the CSS. So we'll say pattern divider. I will set the background image to be this pattern mobile. We'll change it to desktop in a bit. Then the width should be 300 pixels. The aspect ratio should be 1 over 0.1, which is essentially simulating the height, kind of. So the next thing to do, I think that okay, we should just center it. So background position should be center. Then background repeat should be none. Repeat. The background size should be contained. The margin inline, which is left and right, margin inline. Okay, I was at this finished code before, so this is where we want to be. So margin inline should be auto. Then let's save to see what we have so far. Okay, we're not getting the image. And why is that? Okay, this should be pattern divider. Okay. Alright, cool. So what we need to do right now is to say the position should be relative and top should be 2 rem. So we'll push this button down a bit, but let's just leave it as it is right now. Okay, cool. I'll also add it right here. Let's just try this out. So you can see margin bottom should be 2 rems. Did it work right? Okay, works fine. Work fine too, but let's just leave it as it is here. Alright, cool. Then for desktop screen, so let's say 1200 pixels and up. You can change this value to whatever you want. The pattern divider should have a background image, and the URL should be the assets desktop. Okay, cool. So for the button, before we start the button, think okay, there are some changes we need to do. We need to copy this now, place it right here. I'll give this a class of rotate, because we'll be rotating these dies when we are trying to get a new advice. So say button image, give it a width of 20 pixels and a height of 20 pixels, and also center it in the center. So margin inline also. So btn. Alright. So next thing now is to get the btn itself and say the border should be none. The outline should be known as well. The background color should be transparent. Or just resetting the button styles. And the background color should not be transparent. Let's just give it this color instead. This accent 400. Okay. Give it a height of 50 pixels, a width of 50 pixels. Alright, cool. Then we need to display inline block so that we can add other properties to it. Then we need to make it round, so 50% round. Cursor should be pointer. I also need to give it a position of relative, and we need it over here. So I just say top should be 4 rem. So it's coming right now. Okay, we also need this transition. So when we over it, we need this little transition. So we'll say transition. Let's just add that right now. Create it in a bit. Box shadow 2s is in. So when we over it, open box shadow and say box shadow. So 0 for the blur should be 15 px and color should be this asset color. When we over it, you can see we're getting this. Since the x should be 0, y should be 0, then the blur should be 15 pixels. Then we also need to filter, use the filter property and filter the blur to -8 pixels. So the difference is not really showing, but it's really hard to tell. You can see it's appearing right here. Alright, so lastly we need to animate this dice button or click on it. So we'll say rotate, we give it a class of rotate here. So animation, and give it a name of spin. Should spin 500 milliseconds, linear and infinite. So it should go the full circle. And basically just will be turning around forever if there's something wrong with the endpoint or something. So these dials will just be turning around. So we just add at keyframes and put in the name of the animation right here. It says from transform rotate 0° to transform rotate 360 degrees. So it should go full circle. So we'll click on this right now. You can see that we have that spinning dice. So we didn't have it right here. This one is just going directly. So I quickly just thought of it and decided to add it right here. And it's also responsive too. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. Let me know if you have any question in the comment section, and do leave a like and subscribe if you found the video helpful.